Hey everyone, welcome to the Joy of SharePoint. Just a few minutes, we will be talking about a few of our favorite things. I'm going to give it a couple, let some more people join. So this is your chance to go freshen up your coffee, get your caffeine and snack of choice, and then we'll be right back with you. Alrighty, I show it is straight up 11 o'clock Central Time, noon for those of you out to the east. I have with me today Stephanie Donahue and Stephen Wilson, both with Pait Group. How are you guys doing today?
Not too bad. How are you?
Pretty good. Are you guys in the Christmas spirit?
Slowly getting there. Slowly. I'm finally done traveling, so I can get into the spirit now. Maybe start my shopping.
That's what Amazon is for.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Closest thing I've gotten is my wife and I got like some uh like a gift list from like a local elementary school child. We don't have any kids, and so for us, Christmas is one of those things like well, neither of us need anything,
Oh
so we
yeah.
just went and we went shopping for this kid, and well, it says he needs shirts. We'll get him a Batman shirt, and a Captain America shirt, and all that.
Don't discriminate. Yeah, you got to get Marvel, you got to get DC, make sure everyone's equally represented, right?
Absolutely.
I love it. Well, today we are going to be talking about a few of our favorite things, but this is going to be the Microsoft edition. So not just schnitzel with noodle and whiskers on kittens. Not that there's anything wrong with those. But Office 365 really is kind of a feeling of, if we're going to be optimistic, Christmas every day or every week, because it seems every time I go in, especially to the SharePoint interface, there's something new or slightly different there. It does tend to lead to a sense of adventure every time I do a live demo, because I never know what's going to be different, what button click has changed, or what feature has been added. So I thought that this would be a perfect time of year to kind of do a recap and talk about some of the favorite new things that have happened inside of Office 365. I'm going to kick it off with SharePoint because, it is the joy of SharePoint. But it's not just SharePoint that sees these changes. We do have the modern interfaces that have come to our lists and libraries, modern sites such as the communication sites and the team sites. And we will say technically Teams was launched at the end of 2016, But Stephanie, I think you can back me up on this. It is like wildfire this year, everyone that's interested in Teams.
Yeah, I was trying to think. It's almost like, Christmas time, you get those monthly gifts. It's the gift that never stops giving. Just you keep getting more good stuff. Yeah, there's a lot there.
There's a lot there. Flow has definitely started to make waves in the community. There's all kinds of new stuff that's constantly being added to that functionality. And then we'll talk about forms just briefly and round it out with some Power Apps. So I have to say, I am guilty of when I first went to a library and the modern lists and library interface was introduced. I looked at it and I looked at it again, and then I saw the little link that said switch to classic, and I said yes please. Stephen, did you do that too?
Yeah, it was pretty much like a single look and then sort of a nope, nope.
Yep, nope, not going to do this today. And
You guys are breaking my heart, man. You're breaking my heart.
Yeah, don't listen to this part, Stephanie. Boss lady.
Well, Mark used to tell us to do it.
But, in our defense, it wasn't fully baked when they released it. Am I allowed to say that on the air? But they're just, okay, how do I do X, Y, Z? And it just wasn't there. And also, when you're trying to efficiently help somebody, phishing takes time, right? So I think we were kind of guilty about switching back and forth to classic more than necessary, but I will say in the last, I don't know, it's been at least a solid 4 or 5 months since I felt the need to do that, because they've put more stuff in there. They've added the flow button, they've added more the share link across the toolbar at the top, and actually just in the last, I want to say 30 days or so, if you look at the screen, that required info block, that color coding for required metadata, has made its presence known. And we're getting some mixed reviews on that. Some people...
I was I'm not 100% sure.
Go for it, Stephen.
Like when it first came out, I don't even think there was the quick edit item.
You could be right. You could be right on that. Yeah, there were a lot of things, and the view stuff didn't work quite right.
Yeah, that was the stage at which I was like, no, no. And so I think sometimes it's hard to say when Microsoft has actually quote-unquote released something. Between being able to see it and it being the default are two different things.
So it's probably important to note here as well. The first release is often where we sit, right? And so there is a difference too between what you're going to see in your first release users, apart from what the rest of your users are seeing as well. And so sometimes those things happen in first release that you wouldn't see quite as much once things are fully baked in and pushed out. So important note to keep in mind there that first release, let's see, a few more features, they'll come out early. There might be, we're kind of the world's guinea pigs right now, so we're the ones in their first release. And actually, I think they changed it now. It's targeted release is what they call it now. So there's another tip for you. First release users are now targeted release users, and that means we have a select group of users in the organization who get to kind of vet some of these things out and decide, are we going to release these things to the users or not? And sometimes they let you make that choice, and sometimes they don't. But that is kind of a testing ground. So important thing to keep in mind that it's not always like that by the time it gets to everyone in the organization.
Yeah, and that's what I mean when I say it's kind of a slippery thing to say when it was released, because we saw it before most people did. And I think at that point is when some things just weren't quite there. But by the time everybody started seeing it, typically there were enough features to get by. Like, they still improved it since then, like the flow button and things like that. But, when people generally first started seeing it, it was still pretty good. But, the first view, like when it, was just immediately like, this is the first time any outsider besides Microsofties have seen it, that's when we're talking about it. It was kind of rough. But by the time it started to get to just the general users, it was pretty functional.
And I think that highlights Microsoft's interest in the community, because they do rely on those of us that are first release, or now I think as of this week, the targeted release like Stephanie mentioned. They rely on getting feedback on these things. And for those of you that may get these features after they've been out for a little while, you know, you're not in that first bleeding edge availability of these features. Still, Microsoft is very invested in hearing feedback on these new features and capabilities as they're available. So definitely get plugged into the community. The Office blogs are a great place to start too, to read up on what's here and what's coming. And there's a question. I see Flow there on the toolbar. I've not seen on my classic view. Okay, Stephanie, looks like you've got that one taken care of. And Flow does work inside of SharePoint, but it is also outside of SharePoint. So there is integration into the environment, to answer your question, Tori. So one thing I wanted to mention is kind of one of my new favorite little features that's been brought into the list and library interfaces, is that you can actually auto tag an item if you drop it into a grouped view, which is kind of cool. And I didn't see this in any blog anywhere. Ryan, actually our Ryan, mentioned it. And I am going to do a quick demo of that real quick. She said hopefully. So I'm going to go into my document library. Once again, she said hopefully. Let me get my taskbar back. There we go. So you see here, this is just a plain Jane document library. Really the only thing I've done here is I've added a primary contact column. I've made it required, and you can see some of these haven't been filled out yet, and I've got that little color coding alerting me to the fact. So that is new. If you're not familiar with this, you know, back in the olden days, you could not upload something into a library if you did not fill out the required metadata. That has changed. You now can, but you get this alert here that there's required information missing, and it also gives you this little red notification on your view options drop down. So that's something good to be aware of. I'm loving this. Okay. So I'm going to just grab a document here real quick after I go to my grouped view, which I've cleverly named grouped, so I know what it is when I'm doing a demo. And I'm just grouping it by this primary contact. That's really all that's going on there. So I've got a document I'm going to drag over, and I'm going to drop it in Stephanie's. You see that little metadata tag that kind of shows up over to the left? So I'm going to drop that in. SharePoint's going to tell me it's uploading an item. And if you notice, it automatically tagged that with Stephanie's name. So I like grouped views if we're in an environment where we're trying to convince people that SharePoint doesn't have to have a lot of folders in it, right? We can kind of give an organized view without being in a folder-rich environment. This little piece of functionality can kind of help encourage people to use a non-folder view, because SharePoint's doing just one step of auto tagging for us. I have tried doing it like 2 levels deep in grouping, and it only tags the highest level, but I still think that's pretty cool. So I thought I would show that to those of you that haven't seen that in action before. Pretty nifty little feature that they have brought to us.
Before you move on there, Joy, I think there's a good story here, because over and over I hear I'm too busy to tag with metadata. And here you go. All you have to do now is drag and drop it into the correct place. It's really easy. You don't have to hit that upload button and get the metadata screen. You're just dragging and dropping. One step, you're done. And it's going to do that tagging for you. So I think that's a pretty compelling story for those users that insist they're too busy for metadata tagging.
Oh, absolutely. And this follow-up to that is, how many columns is too much to have required, right? And that answer is going to vary depending on your culture. In some places, one might be a bridge too far. In some places, you might be able to get away with 5. But if you can do little things like this to help your people, because we are busy. Our users really are busy, even though we may roll our eyes sometimes. Little things like this help make it that much easier. Good value add, really is. Let me see if I can convince PowerPoint to come back up and play nice. Okay, so modern
I was going to
interface.
say while you're working on that, the demo that you just did is also a good thing for anybody who's doing any kind of training or mentoring in their environment. Like even if it's just stopping by people's desks to show them how to do something. I think that's a good demo to do, both because the auto tagging, and I still run into a lot of users who don't realize they can drag things into libraries.
Yes, you are correct. Drag and drop, people. It's awesome.
Yeah, and I think sometimes just showing people those simple things, like when they see that, they're like, oh, I didn't know that worked.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of thing can become viral inside an organization. You show somebody in one group, and they'll tell everybody else they work with.
Well, I still every once in a while get questions from people. It's like, well, how are we supposed to get stuff into SharePoint now that we don't have the Explorer view available?
Mm-hmm.
You just gotta go, well, let me show you. And you show, like you said, you show them that drag and drop, which maybe they weren't aware of before because they just haven't done it that way before. And really does make the quality of work life better. And we spend so much time at work, we might as well make it as easy as possible. So, modern sites, ton of buzz around modern sites. Stephanie, you're on client sites more than most of us. How often do you hear the words mobile friendly?
Pretty often, every other word. Yeah, that's definitely coming up a ton right now. And it's not, I think we're getting outside of just the corporate environment, and now we're talking about people in the field, people in manufacturing plants, things like that, where mobile is a game changer. So it's more than just me as a corporate user being able to take my tablet with me as I travel, or me answering something from my couch in the evening. It's really hitting every area of the business, even during the middle of the workday.
And I was in a demo for something earlier today, and the demo, someone mentioned mobile friendly, and the customer that we were demoing with immediately was like, "Can we turn that off?" And I was shocked, because their concern was about security, and I think that there were other ways to address their security concern, but it becomes so common now for people to want mobile to be available. For someone to ask that question is a little shocking, but mobility is a nice add-on. I don't think that phones are anywhere close to replacing desktops in terms of like getting work done, but just the ability to go from your phone to your desktop so that you can go out to lunch or something and get a notification that something has changed, so that you don't have to spend that 15 minutes catching up when you get back to work. It's a fantastic thing to have, just sort of that availability, even if you don't want to use it all the time to manage your document libraries or something.
Well, and gone are the days if we truly are embracing the cloud at mobile friendly. And for me personally, it's been a change to stop dumping things on my desktop and put them in OneDrive, where they should have been anyway. But gone are the days where we have to think, oh man, can I really schedule that dentist appointment? Because, he always takes 20 minutes after I get there to see me, and that's wasted time, blah, blah. If you have that smartphone with you, or even a tablet, work can continue. And these modern sites that are becoming available, and there are two, for those of you that haven't really gone out and started exploring, there are the communication sites, which really are more tended to broadcast information out to an audience. Doesn't really have all of the robust team collaborative features that our traditional team sites do. I'm not saying they won't in the future, but there are just a few things that aren't there geared for document collaboration, right? That's not the intent necessarily. And then we have our modern team sites that have come out, and those do have that collaborative functionality behind them. but it gives us a modern page view. And that's the screenshot I've got on my slide. That's a modern team site. The home page is a site page. You can actually do mobile editing on these sites when you're out and about. I think we all remember, was it in May when Microsoft did the demo and she showed us her updating her communication site from, I think it was an iPhone or an Android, but a smartphone, not even a tablet. It's powerful what can be done, and business can continue, whether you're at the dentist office or having a business lunch or even just on vacation and there's an emergency. You don't have to lug the whole office with you. It's just right there. Really, it's fantastic. The pages, I didn't do any screenshots of pages, but the new site pages that are available. And if you have created a modern site, or a modern team site, and you don't see the site pages page type available, there is a feature in the SharePoint admin panel that has to be turned on for that. But it gives you these really nice layouts, easy to edit pages, fantastic functionality for bringing content from your sites and your lists and your libraries all to one page that you can then view on your phone, whether you're using your browser or if you use the actual SharePoint app. Do you guys have any opinions to offer on that before I move on?
I think maybe that's one of the things that we miss a lot of times, that there's been like this weird transition that doesn't come up a lot, that, you know, the things that you can do in the browser in SharePoint have gotten better and better all the way around, you know. So it used to be pretty much IE only, and then, you know, Firefox and Chrome could do most stuff. But now, you know, all the browsers participate pretty well, and even a lot of the mobile browsers do pretty well with SharePoint if you're only in certain areas. But if you have like a large tablet or something, it's almost, you know, a one-for-one thing. You can just use it just like you would a laptop. So like if you had an iPad Pro or something, you're pretty much good to go in SharePoint.
Mm-hmm. And it really just depends on how small a screen you're willing to tolerate.
Mm-hmm.
Because the functionality is by and large there.
Yeah, and that's why I said it won't necessarily replace a desktop, because you just can't, you know, necessarily type well as quickly on a phone keyboard as you can on a full-size keyboard. I know a lot of people, you know, they see people who can text up a storm, but they're using a lot of emojis and they're using a lot of shortened words and things like that. So you're not going to sit there and write a proposal on your phone usually, you know, but just having the ability to check the proposal, check the meeting agendas, check the documents that you have, and look at them on a mobile screen makes a lot of sense for you. But then if you do have, say, an iPad Pro or something like that, you can do most of your work with SharePoint. You know, you've got access to Office online, you can edit the documents, you can upload, you can do all the normal things.
And you can, if you're crazy, I'll confess, I actually worked on a PowerPoint presentation on my iPhone the other day, and it's just the 6S. It's not one of the big ones, but I was stuck, I was bored, and it wasn't fun, but I did it.
Better than spending 3 hours playing Candy Crush.
Heck yeah. Stephanie, confess, have you written a proposal on your iPhone?
I think Stephanie may have had to have stepped away for a moment.
Okay. Yes, she did mention that might happen. 'Tis the season.
Indeed it is.
Next, we have Teams. Teams is exciting, though maybe it's just because I'm old and I'm skeptical now, but when Teams first announced, we have a new chat platform, I rolled my eyes and said, child, please, the last thing I need in my life is another chat platform. But then I got into it, and then we started using it. And when Olivera, our project manager, said, I'm going to start putting all new projects as channels inside of Teams. Wow, I like it. I like it a whole lot. Stephen, have you immersed yourself fully in the Teams experience, or are you still hanging on to Skype for Business?
No, actually, I've always not been a fan of Skype, and so I've been real happy with Teams overall. Skype, you know, works well for like kind of those external users for like web conferences and stuff with external people, but for whatever reason, Teams feels a lot more frictionless. Like if I'm, interacting with you or something, we hit that call button pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
After about 4 back and forths of typing stuff, we just hit the call button and start talking.
Yeah, it does work really well.
Yeah, I mean, we don't use the video too much because we already know what we look like. But the call function is really, really a big thing for us internally, I think, because we're in a lot of different, geographic areas. You're in your kooky time zone, and
Mm-hmm.
so we just hit the button and we, pick up whatever we're doing. And generally, once you're doing a call, you can pretty much shrink it down to nothing on your screen. You can go back to doing whatever you were doing and just collaborate on something pretty easily. And it feels a lot less difficult than Skype for Business did in getting
Agree.
connected and all that stuff.
Yeah, I would say the connectivity seems to be a little smoother, and I have truly enjoyed, again, so if in your organization, guys, if you have these little areas of productivity, where you may or may not need a SharePoint site, but you definitely need to have a channel of communication and a place to put stuff surrounding this activity. It could be a short-term project. It could be busting out a proposal for something. It could just be an internal department initiative. Teams is going to give you a place to put your files. It has a little wiki tab where you can just have little information. Like for us, we put instructions on how to get into different environments in the wiki tab. So we always know if I need to go to XYZ, click on the wiki tab, my data's there. I don't have to go search on some other SharePoint site for it. I've got my channel right in Teams. And there's a question about external users. Is this just available on 2016 on-prem or online? I will find out an answer for you and get back to you. That is inside of Teams, and the ability to invite external users came out, I want to say in the summer. That's for the entire Teams platform as far as I know.
Yeah, Teams, I don't know if you actually can use Teams as a direct part of an on-prem 2016.
Right.
I haven't looked into that because when you create a team in the Teams interface, it actually does back itself with a SharePoint site collection. It's kind of a hidden modern site collection.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't show up in the regular administrative interface for SharePoint and SharePoint Online. And so I'm not sure you can hook Teams up to an on-prem environment. I'd have to look into that. There may be some way to do it through some sort of hybrid arrangement, but I haven't actually seen anybody try it, so I haven't looked into it.
That's a good question. We appreciate that. Cool thing I found out too about Teams, so this may be the next wave of the future for the webinars next year. Record meetings with transcriptions, and those get stored in Stream. So some of you may be using the video channel. That is going to be in transition to Stream here over the next maybe 6 months or so. I'd have to double check my dates on that. But for those of you that have needs for accessibility, the transcriptions being available with the meetings, I think, is a huge deal. And I can even think of a couple of clients that do various languages for their content, so that would be one step closer to for them to be able to translate into those different languages. And it does give a really fun little Brady Bunch look and feel when you've got a few people on the phone. I think that's nice.
You can't actually get 9 people in there, though. That's the thing that disappoints me.
Very sad. And as we mentioned before, mobile is the new buzzword, right? So there is a mobile app. It does now support the different tabs in your channels. It did not up until a few months ago. So again, new stuff is coming constantly, and it's really exciting to see these features become available as you're using the product. We have transitioned over at Pait Group to using Teams for I would say almost all of our internal communication, unless it really needs to be an email. It works well. The notification between desktop and mobile are fantastic. I can't complain about how well you stay up to date in both locations.
I would agree, except for today you said you put something in Teams and I still can't find it. So, uh, but yes, I think overall, like we've transitioned to, instead of creating sites for all of our customers, we've been creating them in Teams. I
Hmm.
do have concerns for some larger groups. Uh, if they did the same thing that we do, where basically we invite everyone to those things, uh, I think the interface would get cluttered pretty quick. So you would probably want to be a little more choosy about who you invite to things. But the permissioning is still there, which is one of the nice things. You can create a team and then you can invite who is in that team, and then it shows up in their interface, but it doesn't show up for other people.
Yeah.
So I like that about it, that it can be selective. So even though you may be a very large organization, if your work groups are fairly small, 5 or 10 people, then you can have a dozen different channels just for those 5 or 10 people. And so like the HR department can work on something and it not be a public discussion. You know,
Hmm.
it, the fact that you can kind of self-select, you know, in an environment where the creation of teams is completely open, where anybody can do it. I can create a team that's just you and I, and no one else will see it. No one else has to deal with our traffic. No one else has to deal with, the notifications from it. It's just a private channel between you and I that's persistent versus
Yep.
just popping into a chat conversation. It's something where we can put all of our stuff and we can, put our documentation and everything about whatever project we're working on, and it doesn't interfere with anybody else. It doesn't clutter up other people's mail folders, things like that. So
And just a heads up, as you mentioned that with it being use that persistent chat, there is search inside of that, which is fantastic. That has helped me find things very quickly. And yes, Skype, you can save to the conversation folder, but I have found that it's not 100%. But the good news and the bad news is Teams will soon be taking over the world. So, and we just had a comment about big change management hurdle there for those large organizations, um, and the numbers I'm seeing, very, very large organizations that are going to need to be doing some transition work. Um, the good news is, I'm going to say it's good news. I don't know. We'll see. They do seem to be making these changes in small, manageable chunks. It doesn't seem like they're trying to integrate too much too soon, to kind of make the process easier as this integration and kind of the old switcheroo starts to take place. Here's an interesting question, Stephen. Can or should you try to integrate Teams with a more traditional intranet portal?
so on that was kind of what I was saying before. Every time you
Yep.
create a team, it does create a site collection in the SharePoint infrastructure. It doesn't show up under the SharePoint site collections yet, though I have heard rumored that it will soon, that if you go into SharePoint,
Mm-hmm.
you'll see the
Mm-hmm.
team site collections. Uh, so you can see teams and groups as an area in the tenant management for Office 365, but you don't see exactly where it uh, falls in the SharePoint infrastructure. But it does have essentially a SharePoint site. So the next question also, are there document management features and things like that? It's just a document library. So when you upload something into Teams, it just goes into a document library in a site collection. And that site collection is a modern site collection, but it has all the features that are normal for a SharePoint site collection. So you can do all of those things because the way Teams exposes that stuff is just essentially as a panel. You set it up as a tab and it just backs into the document library or whatever. So the
That's
features are
almost.
there, and then you can also just sort of click on an option and it'll open it up in the browser in the location it's in SharePoint. So at that point you can do everything that you would normally do in a document library.
Yep, it's just a slightly different interface. It's almost like, I like to say, one-stop shopping. This kind of gives you an interface so you can chat. You can actually have a document and have a conversation while you all are co-authoring that document together. I mean, so some of that management feature goes above and beyond what you might just do outside of Teams. But yes, there's control there because that site collection is placed in your tenant. So managed metadata, things like that will be available. Your search, it's there. The safety of backups, the security around it, all that's still there. You're still getting that good, that SharePoint goodness that we have all come to know and love, and sometimes roll our eyes at.
Well, I don't want to. I don't want to snake oil it. I don't want to make it sound like it's a cure for everything.
Sure.
But the fact that it does back into a platform like SharePoint that's been around for a while, so there's a lot of maturity there. Not to be too specific, but it's not like this is the first platform of its kind, and Microsoft has, shall we say, borrowed some ideas from other people who have been doing this a little longer. And so pretty much as soon as Teams came out, it had a lot of good things going on because it wasn't really that first pass. Like sometimes when a product comes out, you're like, oh, this will be great in 2 or 3 years. Teams had a lot of good things going on right off the bat because they took a lot of good ideas that had kind of been floating around in the knowledge sphere for a while, where people have been doing these kinds of collaboration platforms. They just did a smart job of integrating it with their existing infrastructure. And so I think the idea of using SharePoint as the back end was a good idea on their part because they didn't have to reinvent the wheel for that. They just kind of had to push the data from Teams into something that was already mature and already had a lot of the features that they would have wanted. And so it's a much older product in some ways than it seems.
And like you said, those features in that mature product of SharePoint, I worked with some folks a lot last month, and one question that came up over and over with the various groups for that client was, is this HIPAA compliant? Well, we know SharePoint is, right? It's a safe place. And is my data safe? Yes, it is. Is it going to be backed up? Yes, it is. So we do get all of that good safety net and all that security that we have gotten used to. It's just being surfaced to us from a slightly different angle.
Well, that means I think SharePoint can be HIPAA compliant. Just because something's in SharePoint doesn't make it HIPAA.
Well, this is true.
But as long as you maintain the same kind of management that you have, for maintaining HIPAA compliance in SharePoint, then yes, it will follow that.
So let's talk Flow. Flow has come a long way in a short period of time. So for those of you that have not been introduced to Flow previously, it is cloud-based workflow for Office 365, and it also gives you ties to other types of data. So yes, it absolutely connects to SharePoint, OneDrive, Azure, Outlook, SQL Server. Pick a social media platform, it's there. SurveyMonkey, it's there. I mean, I could not physically list on this screen all of the different connectors that are available for Flow. I do have the URL there. For any of you that want to jot that down and go check it out, it is impressive, all of the different connectors that are available for Microsoft Flow. And this is something, it almost feels like this one piece of technology, it seems to get updates faster than just about anything else. I mean, I'm going to say 2 words, and we all, if we've ever used it, are going to have very distinct reaction to it. Those 2 words are SharePoint Designer. Or as those of us that know it and love it, refer to it as SharePoint Destroyer. It does have awesome capabilities. But if you've been working in the product for very long, you may have noticed that some of those capabilities have dwindled over the past few years. It still hurts when I think about them taking away the design view out of SharePoint Designer. And some of the workflow capabilities have gone missing of late. Not all of them. There's still a lot of good stuff you can do. Flow, I think we're all looking to Flow to become the bigger and better and more flexible version of SharePoint Designer. In that it's not baked into SharePoint, so there's a lot more flexibility for data, right? So we use it to get content from social media and feed it into Teams, right? There are connectors into Teams. We can do approval flows with it. You could do something simple like have a flow set up so when your manager sends you an email, Flow will send you a text message, right? Because I think we're a little more responsive to text than we are email, because the last thing we want any given day is another email. So all kinds of capabilities exist inside of Flow. Recent updates are support for choice columns, people columns, lookup fields, being able to launch Flow from your OneDrive for Business. OneDrive for Business really has become my personal work file share, if I can dare call it that. It's built in SharePoint. It's SharePointy in a lot of ways. And now that I can have access to do workflow on my business stuff that sits there in my own personal little SharePoint library, I think that's fantastic. Flowbot for Teams has come around. We haven't played with that yet. Stephen, I think there'd be good potential there. So when we're having client conversations and Olivera needs to be aware, I think we should have a bot just for Ollie that lets her know what's being said. You think
I think she might kill us.
Oh, she might.
She gets enough notifications as it is.
That's true. That's true. Maybe we could have it compare emails to the Teams conversation in anything that doesn't mesh. I don't know. We'll have to play with it. But yeah, what are your thoughts on Flow?
I mean, I think that Flow is one of those things that you have to keep an eye pretty seriously on that connectors page, because just because something is not easily available today doesn't mean it won't be tomorrow. So it's still very much a growing thing. If you have developers who are good with basically JavaScript technologies, JSON and things like that, they can extend it a little further. But as far as the stuff that it can just do straight out of the box, it's growing by leaps and bounds constantly. And it's also, I think, something that will force you into trying new things in Office 365. As you start to use it, you'll start to see pieces where Outlook integrates with one thing, and then it can integrate with SharePoint. And so if you're looking to kind of keep an eye on what's happening without reading all the articles that are out there about Office 365, I like the fact that I can go and I can just check on the connectors and kind of see like where Microsoft's head is, like where they're thinking about the different ideas that customers have for how can I get information from here to here, when it's like a real light touch, where you don't want to build like an entire infrastructure, you don't want to have databases connected and all that stuff. You just want to be able to send from this system to this system just a quick note or a document, something like that. Flow is really good at that kind of stuff. Like just, some of the things like where we can't send emails to a document library in Office 365 like we used to be able to with SharePoint on-premise. Flow allows you to do things like that, where you can just, all the attachments that come to, your email box, you could send those on to a document library somewhere in SharePoint, or you could do something with OneDrive, things like that. So it takes a little time to get your head wrapped around it, because it's not so direct like a SharePoint Designer workflow where you've got the tiny little steps where you're like, wait this period of time, then do this exact thing. This is kind of broader sweeps where you got to think like, okay, I'm going to send an email or I'm going to send a tweet, and then I want it to do this. And so you kind of have to have a looser thought process. You don't control it quite as exactly, but you can do some pretty amazing things.
Yeah, the one of the examples you gave is actually the first flow I was ever involved with, and it was to get all these hundreds of emails about wells. Uh, Instead of sending them out in duplicates to all these people in an organization, we had Flow direct them to one document library, and then
Uh-huh.
everybody got one notification a day to remind them, go go check the well reports they're in, right?
Uh-huh.
Instead of inboxes filling up with hundreds of reports every week. So
Yeah.
right there, this was an on-premises exchange environment too. So we know that email administrator, the exchange admin, appreciated, not having as heavy a load anymore. So just little things like that. But this is one of the products I encourage you. There's actually on the screen, uh, second column, second row, get a push notification with updates from the Flow blog. If you are interested in workflow, if this is something you want to start kind of investing in, maybe some of your free time at work, right? That happens. I recommend setting that up. This is one of the technologies that really updates frequently, and there's
Uh-huh.
really good capabilities that is coming out there. So that's a good one to let that be your first foray into setting up a flow.
Yeah, and
I'm
I,
like,
I really think that that's, sometimes like when you talk about something like Teams or you talk about, uh, a new technology, the first thing that people start doing is like, can we replace this? Can we replace email with Teams? And but this just kind of combines all of those things. It's like the glue that holds all these systems together. And so if you've got one person who prefers to do things in Outlook, they can set up a workflow that will send stuff to Outlook. If someone else prefers doing something in Teams, they can set up a workflow that sends information to Teams. And it's just meant as a connector between all of these systems so that you can unify their features and use it to the best advantage of the person involved.
yep, absolutely, absolutely. And as it grows, it's becoming just more and more of an enterprise solution. I'm gonna flip on over. So I want to talk about kind of a light product for just a second. So for those of you, you just need a form, right? It's just a form. You don't necessarily need a SharePoint list. You don't really need anything terribly complicated. You just need a form. I encourage you to check out Microsoft Forms. It is ridiculously fast and ridiculously easy to set up surveys. And if any of you remember the surveys template inside of SharePoint 2007, that never changed at all, even to today's current date, I really encourage you to check Forms out. You can do polls, you can do quizzes, and actually this training logistics picture I've got here is just something that I maybe put 10 minutes worth of work into, just so I could get some information whenever someone wanted to set up training with me, get some logistical information back so I knew, okay, where am I going? What are we going to talk about? When is this going to happen? Am I going to be presenting on a PowerPoint screen, or am I going to be doing this over Skype? Just easy stuff. And there's an app for that. But let's say this quick, easy, not attached to SharePoint form isn't really what I need. What if I need to be able to connect to existing data that's in SharePoint? Or what if I need to be able to query information from SQL Server, right? Well, I need a heavier solution. PowerApps. And I'll confess, I haven't done a whole lot with PowerApps yet, though that is my New Year's resolution, is to do a deep dive into this. I hope Stephanie's not listening. Um,
I
this is
think
your...
I
Ha
think
ha ha,
as
she's
well.
back.
It's like yeah,
I've been
this
answering questions here for you guys. I'm just listening. I didn't hear anything, Joy, I promise.
Yeah, sure. Uh-huh. Um, but this is going to be the tool, right, to start connecting to that data that already lives somewhere, and then to be able to surface it up. So the screenshot over here, like you see a service desk, budget tracker, a cost estimator, they give you templates to kind of get you started. And I've found that templates are a great place to start just clicking around to see what the possibilities are. But then we can take that data that's already mission critical in our organization and leverage it. So I'm sad Mark couldn't join us today. For those of you that know Mark Rackley, you know that one of his favorite things in the whole wide world is InfoPath. And he cried great big tears when it was retired, and he was really happy when they brought it back. I think he'll like PowerApps to be a replacement for that. What do you think, Stephanie? So InfoPath was something that we... Yeah, now she's going to be quiet. She's not going to touch that one. InfoPath was a great way to get information from people, and it didn't have to be people inside the organization. I worked with some people that managed a airport, and they needed to get information from pilots coming in that weren't part of that organization. So it couldn't be in SharePoint. We're talking about SharePoint 2010. So InfoPath was the way we did that. But InfoPath went away, sorta, kinda, not really. And there's been this gap of how do we gather this information? How do we maybe even leverage these external content types, right? This external data, and manipulate it with or without SharePoint. And this is going to be the way to start working with that. This is a really good way to take our data, put it in app form, because that's kind of the way the world has gone, and really put that data to good use for us. Some of the recent updates, being able to customize SharePoint list forms, much like we did in InfoPath. They've recently given us a point-and-click rule builder for conditional formatting. Compliance certifications are there. I do encourage you to check out the PowerApps blog. I believe it's powerapps.microsoft.com. There are more controls available for tenant admins to be able to see what's going on inside of the PowerApps world. Analytics are there. I know that's a big word for our organizations, to see who's doing what. And coming soon are PowerApps web parts. And you can currently use the embed feature to get some of your PowerApps information on SharePoint pages. But in November, they did announce that there are going to be actual PowerApps web parts available. So,
and I believe those web parts are for modern as well as traditional, aren't they? Or classic, whatever you want to call it.
That's my understanding. That's my understanding. Stephen, have you delved much into the PowerApps world?
Well, I made the classic mistake for a non-developer, and I got into PowerApps the first time when it first came out, and I found it a little frustrating. But going back and looking at it, it's a lot like Flow. It's grown quite a bit, and the things that you can do with it and the ease with which you can do it has changed a lot over a period of time. So yeah, I've done a little bit with it. I haven't done a whole lot. I probably need to, do more. Like you said, your New Year's resolution. I've given up on New Year's resolutions. That was my New Year's resolution last year, was giving up on them. But
let's see.
But I think when we say we need to get into Flow more, we need to get into PowerApps more, it's really just a way of saying that there's a whole lot of possibility there that we just haven't had time to tap into. Because I was never a giant fan of InfoPath in the first place. I think it was when it first came out, it was definitely a tool that was necessary. There was really no other way to do it. Its problem was that in a lot of ways, InfoPath failed to grow with the rest of the internet.
Agreed.
And so PowerApps, I think, is just that catch up. Like, they kind of skipped a generation of tools, and now they're at the cutting edge of the possibilities of doing something that's mobile friendly, ties into a lot of different ways of connecting to SharePoint, and has a lot of control and a lot of analytics and all those things, all the things that maybe they should have been doing over time with InfoPath that they didn't. Now they've kind of just skipped a generation. And so when PowerApps first came out, I felt like it was awful limited. but I wasn't really accounting for the speed at which Microsoft is implementing these things. And compared to what the speed that Microsoft has moved at in the past, because they were on like a release schedule where they were doing like, SharePoint every 2 or 3 years or something.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're making big jumps on things in the space of 3 to 6 months. So even if these things don't do what you want at first, kind of keep on them. And I think you'll find that any common functionality where you can sit in a room with somebody and say like, why doesn't it do this? It's going to pretty soon.
Well, I remember you and I were on the phone on Teams the other day, and I just mentioned that it shouldn't be this hard to change the site icon, because with SharePoint Online, sometimes it's hot pink, sometimes it's blue, sometimes it's green, sometimes it's you just get this whole rainbow option for what color that site icon's going to be. And then you're like, oh, well, what about this? And there was the change button right there on the site information tab that either I just have been blind to, or it's pretty darn new. So we do. It seems to be, whether it's PowerApps or Flow or even just our old friend SharePoint, you come in one day and there's something there that wasn't there before. I was actually in July. I was on site with some folks out in Arizona. I'm like, man, I wish we could let external people into Teams. I was like, yeah, there's discussion about it, but it's not happened yet. It happened the next week.
Uh-huh.
So.
And it's funny that you made the mistake of saying that we were on the phone. I don't think I've ever talked to you on the phone. I think I've called Stephanie once.
Yeah.
But we used like Teams and Skype and SharePoint and email, and we keep in touch that way, even though we're rarely even in the same state. We talk to each other all the time.
And it's fantastic. So I think one takeaway for this year truly has been for me that SharePoint Online, Office Online, whether you're still on Skype or you're moving to Teams, whatever it may be, all of these products have made office life different. I would say the biggest concentration of people in one town for us is you guys there in Ohio, right? There's what, 3 of you? 4? 4. And then
it's 3.
Oh, don't forget Nick. Am I forgetting Nick?
Well, Nick actually lives in Columbus.
That's Ohio.
Oh, well, yeah.
It's Ohio.
I was thinking Cincinnati.
Geography, dude. But we got some Canadians. We got some Arkansas folks. There's me here in Oklahoma, Florida. We're everywhere. but Teams and these mobile apps have really bridged the gap of working remotely to where they're truly, I don't feel much of a difference at all working quote-unquote remote because we've got these great cloud tools. I may be overselling there, but I mean, it really has changed the way we think about going to work and working with remote users.
I live within like a half an hour of Stephanie, but I rarely know what state she's in.
Yeah, then there's that.
And so some of our people travel so much that there would almost be no other way to keep track of them.
Mm-hmm. That's very true. So I'm going to, our time is about up. I've got my email address up here. So if anyone does have any questions that, I was about to say we, but I think I'll say that Stephanie hasn't gotten to, please do feel free to drop an email. I will be more than happy to get an answer for you. But thank you very, very much. This webinar has been a new adventure for me. It's not something I'd ever done before. And you guys have really made it a ton of fun, both those of you that are listening from your various organizations and Stephanie, Stephen, everybody at Pait. I appreciate you guys, and I appreciate everyone joining in today. Any other questions? We're going to hang out here for a few more minutes. But otherwise, you guys go forth, prosper. Go watch the new Star Wars movie this weekend. No spoilers. Stephen, do you have tickets?
I don't have tickets yet. I am going Sunday. I just haven't bought the tickets yet.
So are you sure you're going Sunday?
No, not 100%, but I'm going to give it my best shot. I think by the third day it'll be possible to get a ticket.
That may be. I was refreshing the ticket site to get ours, just to see about half an hour before availability was there, and the site was already up. So I actually cheated and got mine before anybody else could. Stephanie is on these questions.
Yes, she is.
Doing what I can to keep up over here. They've been really great questions today.
They have.
I gave up on answering when I answered one, and then Stephanie answered it right after me. Like, yeah, Stephen's answer is no good. Pay no attention.
Aw. Sorry, I didn't catch any other answers in there. So, something that I'm noticing here, right? I think everybody feels like it's hard to keep up. It's a lot of information all the time. It's kind of like drinking from the fire hose. And people are always asking me, like, how do you keep up? How do I keep my team up to date? And the tech community, techcommunity.microsoft.com, that's where all the latest blogs are going now. I'm seeing more out there even than blogs.office.com. So that seems to be the new hip hop-in place to be for content. And there's also forums. You can ask questions. There are people out there from Microsoft monitoring those forums, as well as Microsoft MVPs that are participating and others that are learning alongside of you as well. So a ton of good content out there. I also go out to Twitter, hashtag Microsoft Flow, hashtag PowerApps. Lots and lots of good content, whether it's a blog, lots of instructional videos are being linked out there, so you can find YouTube videos that'll take you right through, they'll step you through everything. Laura Rogers' Power Hour is another really good one on YouTube, so there are plenty of resources out there that can get you info that'll get you started on a lot of this stuff.
And in case anyone's wondering, Stephanie does talk like this all the time. Hashtag Microsoft.
I know, you got to tell me to stop talking. I do tend to ramble a little. You got to watch me. I get a little excited sometimes.
Well, it's not the rambling. It's just, when you stop in the middle and say hashtag Microsoft Flow.
Is she making the hashtag hand signal? That's what I want to know. Is she sitting there doing the hashtag hand sign?
Oh, I don't know anything about a hand sign. No, I'm not hip enough for that.
I'll have to send you that Saturday Night Live skit. All right.
Send
well,
it through team.
Yes, I will do that. And now my dogs are howling because the tornado siren just went off.
Uh-oh, you better get going.
Good close for the webinar, isn't it?
Thank you. Well, thanks, everyone, and happy holidays.
Happy holidays.